Of course, we cannot very well jump into the car reviews of GT7 Spec II without first of all talking about, probably comfortably, the car that most players were looking forward to the most, the Lexus LFA, and by far the most commonly requested for Polyphony to bring back to the game, the only thing which I saw more love for than the C8 Stingray making its debut. The Lexus LFA is a justified legend, and unlike the Corvette, because this is a returning face, last seen in Gran Turismo 6 alongside the Nurburgring edition, we'll talk about that more in a second, this is a car which I think has less of a chance to disappoint people because you already know what it's like, at least if you played the older games. And one of the things which I actually really like about how they've implemented this car is they've resisted the temptation, perhaps, certainly the temptation that many players might have enjoyed, of having its tuning go far crazier than it can. Because to me, the LFA is a car that I would put into the exact same category as something like a Spiker, or a Chizetta, or a Pagani Zonda. And that is that they are cars that are not designed to be twin-turboed and drag raced. They're designed to be enjoyed as pieces of art, as basically musical instruments with a steering wheel, and as vehicles that are already designed to feel just about perfect. The Zonda doesn't need a twin-turbo. You turn it into the Huayra if you want to do that. You know, a Spiker doesn't need to have 1,000 horsepower. It's not what it's about. Likewise, an LFA doesn't need a supercharged or twin-turbo V10 doing 300 miles an hour. We could do kind of that kind of stuff in the older games, and certainly you can in Forza, but I'm glad that they showed a lot of restraint here. You cannot turbo it. You can't engine swap it, for now at least. You can't supercharge it, and even fully tuned with all of the bits and bobs, you're looking at up around 700-ish horses, which isn't that crazy. In some cases, that's like half of some of the other supercars in the game. In terms of weight, you can drop it by a few hundred kilos, which of course would be beneficial, certainly more so around a track than in a straight line, but it's 1480 to begin with, which is not bad at all. For a modern supercar, that's quite a bit lighter than many others on the market, and more importantly, it feels even lighter than that. You could easily trick someone into thinking this was a maybe 1200, 1250 kilo car stock. It handles itself extremely well, and the long story short version is, if you were looking forward to this, and maybe you either haven't booted up the game yet, or just haven't bought the car in the game yet for whatever reason, because it is pretty expensive, so maybe not all players have the cash, you won't be disappointed. It is an excellent car. It's also the kind of car, and I think this kind of goes without saying, that you should buy because you just like it first, and then if you happen to use it for racing, that could be good. I mean, it definitely could win plenty of races, but that's not really the point of a car like this, as I alluded to just now. In terms of what it's like to drive, the handling is fairly neutral, actually. You can kick the tail out, but it's actually not as tail happy as you might expect for that front engine rear-wheel drive layout with a really high revving Yamaha developed 4.8 litre V10, one of the most iconic modern engines for sure, and its pricing does reflect real life. It's expensive, and it's a hell of a lot more expensive than it was in Gran Turismo 6, that's for sure. 1.5 million credits. It's the second most expensive car in this update, second only to the Nismo 400R of course, but that is accurate to real life. Occasionally, even here in the UK on Auto Trader of all places, you'll see an LFA come up for about £1 million. Sometimes less, but usually about that kind of price. So if you convert that into dollars or various other currencies, 1.5 million, that's not crazy at all. And it does mean another thing which I like as well, and some people think I'm crazy for saying stuff like this, but I've said in the past that if they were to bring back a Ford Model T, like we had in Gran Turismo 4, and make it 20 million credits, I'd happily pay it. If they brought back, just for the joke of it, just for the memes, the 1886 Daimler motor carriage, or the patent motor wagon, and made them 100 million credits, I'd buy them. For no other reason than because it feels like it should be. Those, you know, they're the first cars ever made in the forms of the Daimlers, and in the form of the Ford, well, of course, it's one of the most iconic cars of all time because it's one of, well, the cars of all time. It's a literal meme. It is the template of the car, if you will, in many ways. And this, to me, is similar to that. It feels justified in being expensive because it is that tier of supercar. Not all people will agree necessarily, but yeah, 1.5 million isn't too bad in terms of grinding it. In terms of its overall use in the game, well, the tuning is more than good enough to mean it is a hell of a competitive car, and even if you race it against high-level AI, or at least the highest level of, you know, Sophie or whatever that you can take on at the moment, it handles itself very well, even with no tuning at all. It's a fantastic bit of kit, and interestingly, for those who are, like myself, big fans of seeing the Porsche Carrera GT, another modern V10 icon of the supercar world, arrive in the game, of course, in the case of the Porsche from day one, which was even more impressive, This one, I would say, is probably going to please more players than the Porsche Carrera GT does. Because even though the Porsche, for me at least, is a more desirable car out of the two, the Lexus lives up to what you're hoping it would do and be like, I think, more than the Porsche does. Because for one thing, the Porsche is a lot more expensive. I don't recall if it was an invitation-only car, I think it might have been, but it's also not a begin-friendly car in all senses. It's a car that demands respect, much like it does in real life, and like the Lamborghini Diablo did in the 90s, they were known for being dangerous cars that require a lot of focus, kind of like modern-day Shelby Cobras. This is not like that. This is a much more forgiving car, but one thing that I really love about the LFA, and although I haven't driven one in real life, of course, yet, I would imagine this probably feels the case. To me, the thing that is the single most impressive aspect of the LFA is that it manages to be the least Japanese car ever made in Japan, because it actually has a personality. You know, it's got charisma. And I say that as somebody who's driven plenty of Japanese performance cars. I've even owned one at this point, the Evo. They're very good, they're very impressive, but they don't have as much personality as American or Italian or even some other countries. This one feels like the most Italian Japanese car, at least of the modern era, and I think that's to its credit. It's a very cool car, a very good looking one. The market took a while to appreciate it, and even for me, I didn't love it as much as many people did when it first came out. I've always been more of an ISF kind of guy rather than the LFA. Even now, I wouldn't say I love it as much as many other people do, but it is certainly a car that I've warmed up to over time. It is an incredible bit of kit, and of course, if you were looking forward to it in the game, well, get on there and buy it, because it is great. And in terms of the Nurburgring edition, I'm going to say something else which may be controversial. I don't think we need it. I don't actually think we would need to have the Nurburgring edition in Gran Turismo 7. In the next game, maybe, sure, but you can literally just build it using the aero parts, and they're spot on visually. And we may or may not see that in a future special project update, so stick around for that. And of course, that's it for my thoughts overall on the LFA. Give me your thoughts down below. Well, you may be disappointed. I'd love to hear why in those cases, but of course, if you're enjoying it, let's talk about it down below. And for now, as always, thanks for watching.